Continuing E.A. Wallis Budge's The Dwellers on the Nile, the Life, History, Religion, and Literature of the Ancient Egyptians. We are into the introduction, the historical outline, the Paleolithic age ends around 10,000 BCE, the late Neolithic kingdom, 5,000 to 450 BCE, the independent kings in Upper and Lower Egypt, 4,500 to 3860 or 3,500 BCE. Now, you just read here that the Egyptians talked about some really old dates. So perhaps take them at their word and say that there was something going on during that period before dynastic age proper. Maybe they were preserving something about that. Okay. Yeah, an additional 24,836 years is what they're saying here. So what really went on during that period? And perhaps then before that it was the Atlantean culture, as might be called, or maybe it was the trans-African culture. Not some sea kingdom or something like that people talk about Atlantis. I'm talking about historical African Atlantis. Anyways, the Old Kingdom, the first dynasty, union of Upper and Lower Egypt under Narmer and Ahamenes. The art of writing introduced, native photographs being employed, religious texts composed, and chronological tables compiled. Capitals, Tarkhan and Memphis, raids in the peninsula of Sinai and in Libya, 3,500 to 3,350 BCE. The high state of Egyptian civilization under the early kings of the first dynasty is well illustrated by the monuments which have been recovered from the tombs of Narmer and Aha, either of whom may have been the Menes of Manetho, for each adopted Men and Mena as one of his strong names. And we see the tablet of Narmer, the sculptured green stone palette of Narmer in Cairo. There is a cast of it in the British Museum. Proves that the workers in stone had brought their craft to a high pitch of perfection. The king's Horus name, Narmer, is given on each side of the palette between two heads of Hathor. The supposed Hathor was the supposed cow goddess, who even at the early period was represented as a woman. On the reverse, we see the king wearing the crown of the south. Perhaps it's not supposed to be Hathor, perhaps it is, perhaps we're talking about an ingress into the age of Taurus, which would give us a different date, wouldn't it? On the reverse, we see the king wearing the crown of the south, the conical thing, and a short tunic with a belt and an animal's tail, about to smash into the head of the captive, with a stone-headed mace, just a typical sphere on a staff-looking thing. Behind him stands an attendant carrying the royal sandals in his left hand, and a vase or pot in his right. In front of him is a hawk, like Horus. holding a short chain or cord with a hook, which is fixed in the nose of the bearded captive. From the body of the captive project 6 flower-like objects, which have been considered to represent the number 6,000, and to indicate the number of prisoners taken in a certain campaign. Under the king's feet are 2 dead enemies. On the reverse, we see the king wearing the crown of the north. You know, the curved little thing, but the gap to put the cone bit. And accompanied by his sandal bearer. Before him is the officer Tripped. Yeah. I'm not sure if I said it right the first time. Who directing the carrying of 4 standards, 2 with hawks, 1 with jackal, and 1 with an object of which has not yet been identified with certainty. 3 men are conducting the king to inspect the bodies of decapitated captives, whose heads are placed between their legs. Below these are 2 fabulously long-necked lions, each with its attendant, who wears a loincloth, and below these is a bull, symbolic of the king, breaking into a strongly fortified building, either round or oval, and trampling upon the body of one of its defenders. The scene of the king smashing the skull of a captive enemy was repeated on the monuments from this period, say 3500 BCE to the time of the rule of the native kings and queens of Meroe, and say about 200. Horror was actually, there was actually a king called that. So some of these entities that were worshipped as deities were really divinized kings. Like if we find a historical Jesus, it doesn't mean that, oh, he's really God, like the Bible tells us, you know. Okay. The bull was the symbol of the king, as well as the hawk, and the greatest kings of the 18th dynasty delighted to call themselves Mighty Bull. Connext. And it was the bellowings, hum-humped, of the royal bull, hum-humped, that were supposed to make the whole world quake. On the scene on page 5 is taken from the stone mace head of Narmer, which J.E. Quibble discovered at Hierakonpolis. See Hierakonpolis, London, 1900-1902, in 2 parts. Here we see Narmer seated like a god in a shrine. Well, a god isn't situated with a throne or something like that. It doesn't mean literally sitting in a chair like a human being does. Certainly not with bad posture like I'm doing. Of course, I'm trying to be a little bit quieter, so a little closer. I'm tending to. With sloping roof and pillars, one on each side of the open front, the king wears the crown of the north and holds the whip. The shrine rests on a platform with 9 steps, which became the recognized support for the throne of for the throne of the entity who is on the top of the stairway, Osiris. By the side of the platform are 2 bearers of long-headed fans made of ostrich feathers. Above the shrine hovers the hawk of Horus. On the top register are a cow and a calf. The 4 standards already noticed. In the middle register, under a canopy, resting on a stretcher with short legs, is the king's woman, our queen, and behind her are 3 men dancing a special dance, probably the dance of the entity, which is so greatly beloved by the kings of the 5th and 6th dynasties. Below these is a summary of the spoils taken by Narmer during his wars. Cows, 400,000 cows. Goats, 1,420,000. And captives, 120,000. And at the mention of spoils, my stomach hath rumbled, and you shall see the item which they have been talking about. The figures of men, birds, and animals are well shaped, and the workmanship leaves nothing to be desired. Everything about this monument, that the craftsmen who made it were not only skilled, but experienced, and a wooden tablet celebrating a festival by King Smte when he danced before his entity, the first dynasty. The great events of each year were noted on tablet of this kind, and the history of the king's reign was compiled from such tablets. And we see another bit here. The second dynasty, cult of Apis and Mnevis. I don't think they had any V sounds, so we'll see if there's hieroglyphs to correct this. Ra and Set worshipped 3,350, 3,190. So perhaps Narmer and Aha. No. Okay. Perhaps that's the pronunciation. The third dynasty, wars in Libya, Memphis, the capital, step pyramid of Saqqara. Saqqara, built in Hatep, architect and physician, and Kagemna, the wazir, flourish, 3,190 to 3,100 BCE. The fourth dynasty, Snefru, conquers Sinai, builds the step pyramid at Midum, and a true pyramid at Dahshur, raids the Sudan for slaves and gold, and establishes a fleet in the Mediterranean Sea. Pyramids of Giza built 3,100 to 2,965 BCE. The fifth dynasty, the cult of Ra of Heliopolis, is established, and 3 of his high priests succeed each other as kings of Egypt. Kings styled themselves son of Ra. Sun temples are built, pyramids are built at Abu Sir and Saqqara, and expeditions to Punt, quarries in the Wadi Hammamat worked. Tomb of Unas, inscribed with religious hieroglyphic text, 2,965 to 2,825 BCE. And I'm saying because they're using this line above for the ah sound in some incidences, if they're not being consistent with that, well, that's on them. So, the sixth dynasty, raids in the peninsula of Sinai, the canal made in the first cataract, and the negotiations for the trading purposes opened with the feudal lords of Elephantine, Syene, Aswan. Expeditions made to Punt, in southeast Sudan, raids in northern Nubia. Blacks serve in the army. Well, the Egyptians were black by American standards, but they weren't as dark as the rest of Africans. Like the rest of the Arabs, they weren't as dark as the rest of Africans. Well, I mean, we call them Arabs nowadays, but as sort of a racial southern Semite sort of, or even northern Semite, because the Jews tend to be not related to Semites. But Arab is a fitting word in both Egyptian and Aramaic for the hereditary Jews too. So generals Una and Herkuf flourish. Pyramid tombs, religious inscriptions built at Saqqara. Pepe II reigns more than 90 years. Feudal chiefs assert their independence, and the Old Kingdom ends 2825 to 2631 BCE. The Old Kingdom practically ended with the downfall of the 6th dynasty. The 7th and 8th dynasties is a period of anarchy. Descendants of the Memphite kings and upstarts claim the throne. The 9th and 10th dynasties, feudal lords of Hanasu, Heracleopolis, attack the Memphites and proclaim themselves with the help of the lords of Lycopolis, the Asute kings of Egypt. One of them, Kati, writes a book of precepts for his son. Wars of the lords of Heracleopolis and Lycopolis against the lords of Thebes. The Thebans are victorious. I should be saying Theban, shouldn't I? Even in Greek, The 11th dynasty. 2 kings are called Antef, are succeeded by 4 or 5 called Mentuhotep. One of the last named builds a pyramid, tomb, and a funerary temple at Thebes. The Middle Kingdom, the 12th dynasty, many raids in Nubia. That country is conquered so far south as the head of the Third Cataract. A raid in Syria. A canal is remade in the First Cataract, and one made to join the Nile and the Red Sea. Gold mines in the eastern desert worked. Commerce with Punt, Syria, and Mediterranean peoples developed, and Egypt becomes very rich. Systematic irrigation introduced, and great reservoirs made in the Fayum. Pyramid tombs built at Lisht, Dahshur, Alahun, and Hawara. Labyrinth built. Great development of literature and the first reconstruction of the Theban Book of the Dead compiled. End of the Middle Kingdom, 2200 to 2000 BCE. So that's the 12th dynasty. The 13th and 14th dynasties is a period of anarchy, struggle between the descendants of kings and usurpers in Upper and Lower Egypt. The length of the period is uncertain. Oh, did I forget a plural and something else I mentioned here? The U at the end. Haku, Sha, Su are the Hyksos. The 15th and 16th dynasties, the Hyksos, are the shepherd kings, i.e. the nomad tribes of Palestine and Syria. It wasn't called Palestine until the Romans, but yeah. Because they didn't call themselves the wallowers of the female Satan. Because the Tun is the female Satan in the Aramaic language. Aramea is what it was called in their own tongue. Supported by Hittites and others, invade Egypt with chariots and horses and conquer the country and oppress the people. They suffered defeat by the Thebans in the 17th dynasty under Seqen-Ra III, who was slain in battle. Length of the rule of the Hyksos is unknown. The New Kingdom, we start with the 18th dynasty, ruling from Thebes. The Hyksos, expelled by Ahmes I, and Palestine and Syria become provinces of Egypt. Under Ahmes, a truly military dictator, Egypt becomes a warlike power with horses and chariots and a large army. Wars in Libya and Syria. Nubia conquered as far as the foot of the Fourth Cataract. Wars in Western Asia. The country conquered as far north as the upper Euphrates. Egyptian colonies are made, and governors of all important towns and cities are appointed by Pharaoh. Western Asia and the Sudan pour tribute into Egypt, which becomes the richest country in the world. All trade routes are seized by the Egyptians. Trade with Punt, Arabia, Syria, Palestine, and many islands in the Mediterranean quickly developed. Thutmose IV marries a princess of Mitanni, and Amenhotep III marries several Mesopotamian princesses. Treaties made with kings of Babylon and Assyria, great temples built at Abydos, Thebes, Sub, and other places, granite obelisk and colossi erected. Amenhotep IV confiscates the retinues of Amen, founds a capital at Tal al-Amarna, builds temples to Aten, the solar disk, alienates his people, fails to support Egyptian authority in Western Asia, which throws off the yoke of Egypt. Art and sculpture and the handicrafts generally developed. Magnificent buildings and tombs constructed, display of vast wealth and luxury universal. Egypt loses her Asiatic empire 1600 to 1350 BCE. In the 19th dynasty, worship of Amen is restored and his priests are reinstated. The code of laws is compiled. Wars with Libyans and Nubians, and the Hittites and their allies. Egyptians finally compelled to make a treaty with the Hittites. Gold mines of the eastern Sudan worked, and the rock-hewn temples of Kalabsha and Abu Simbel made. The Hall of Columns in Karnak and other great buildings constructed splendid tombs on the plane of those of the 18th dynasty, hewn in the hills of western Thebes. Israel, Syrians, and others reduced to captivity. 1321 to 1205 BCE. And we could say this relates to the Saul legends, but the 20th dynasty, not Saul of Tarsus, the other Saul. The 20th dynasty, wars with the Libyans and the peoples of the sea, were defeated on sea and land. Egypt ceases to be a military power and employs foreign mercenaries. Commerce greatly develops. The country prosperous and wealthy. The decay of Thebes. The priest of Amen usurp the royal power. And Harher, one of them, seizes the throne. 1205 to 1100 BCE. In the 21st dynasty, the priest of Amen, ruling at Thebes, and Nes Ben Epitet, and his descendants at Tanis in the Delta. The Libyans acquire great power in Egypt, 1100 to 947 BCE. The 22nd and the 23rd dynasties, from Bubastis, Shishak, as is called in Aramaic sources. The Libyan seizes the throne. There's a raid in Palestine, and Jerusalem is captured. The history of this period is not clear. 947 to 720 BCE. The conquest of Egypt by Pianki, the Nubian, 721 to 715. The 24th dynasty, from Sais, Bakenrenef, slain Mashabaka, the Nubian, 1718 to 1712 BCE. The 25th dynasty, From Napata and Nubia, the Nubians rule all Egypt. Esarhaddon invades Egypt, defeats Tir-Haka, takes Memphis, and appoints governors over the cities of the Delta. Rebellion in the Delta, which is quelled by Ashur-banipal, king of Assyria, who retakes Memphis, advances to Thebes, and plunders and destroys the city, appoints a new set of governors, and returns to Nineveh, and Tir-Haka and Tanu-Tamen escape his vengeance, 715 to 650 BCE. And the 26th dynasty, from Sais, Egypt prospers. Necho invades Palestine, defeats Josiah, and is defeated by Nebuchadnezzar II, raids in Nubia and on the Syrian coast. Alliance with the Greeks, who enter Egypt in large numbers. Naucratis founded the western delta, increased prosperity and great development of trade. Egyptians make an alliance with the Greeks against the Persians, 663 to 525 BCE. The 27th dynasty, from Persia. The Persians under Cambyses conquer Egypt, 525 BCE. Well, the Achaemenid dynasties, wouldn't that be the time? The Temple of Amun and Osiris of Karga built. A school for priests is established at Sais, and stamped coinage introduced. The revolt of Khabash, the 28th dynasty, from Sais. Of the acts of its one king, Amartias, nothing is known. The 29th dynasty, 3 kings who reigned in all about 20 years. The 30th dynasty, from Sibonitis, renewed prosperity in Egypt. Temple to Horus built at Bahbit el-Hajara, and many temples repaired. Abydos, Edfu, Karnak, constant fighting between the Egyptians and Persians, but at length the latter were victorious. There's a large temple built at Philae, the 31st dynasty. Well, it's interesting that we have a 31st dynasty, and that's the number of verses in the Quran that mention the jinn. And also the number of repetitions of but and it's the word for no, L-A, well, in Semitic languages. But from Persia, the second period of Persian rule lasted from 359 to 331 BCE. 332 BCE, Alexander the Great becomes king of Egypt. 323 BCE, the death of Alexander the Great. Ptolemy, Lagus, administrators and kingdom on the behalf of Arhidaeus, son of Philip II of Macedon, and Alexander II died in 311 BCE, the son of Alexander the Great. 305 BCE, the Ptolemy Lagus. 305 to 330 BCE, Ptolemies 1 through 16 rule Egypt. 30 BCE, Egypt becomes a province of the Roman Empire. And okay, we have Cleopatra, the last Ptolemaic queen of Egypt, wearing the vulture headdress of Mut, the crowns of Hathor, and the lunar disc surmounted by the symbol of Isis. The cartouche, Claire Oua Pad Rat. So that gives her name. And the principal kings of Egypt, whose names have been recovered from the monuments. The pre-dynastic kings of Upper Egypt, Seku, Ta'u, Thesh, Wechnar, Mecca, from the stele of Palermo, Lower Egypt, Ro Aru, Ap, the Scorpion King. And the dynastic kings, the first dynasty, you have Narmer Men, Narmerza, Aha Manu. Narmer or Aha was the Menes of Manetho, Tuchur or Kent, Tucha or Atcha, the serpent, Ten or Den, Simte or Casti, Merpeba, Anchab, Smerkat, Nekte, Sen or Keba. The second dynasty has Hetep or Hetep, Sakmui, Ranab or Kakau, Banetcher or Benetru, and another grouping is Sekemab, Perenmaat, Perebsn, and the first two names are the king's horse names, the third is his set name. Okay, so we, 5 names is more standard. Why? Senti, Neferkara, Nefer Keseker, Chefa, and the third dynasty has Ka Sekem, Ka Sekemui, and it's the horse names of Besh. So Besh, Chesser, Senekt, Chesser Teta, Neferka, Ra, Huni, Seneferu, and perhaps the first king of the 4th dynasty there, but let's pause there. I'm sorry for the sneezing. I was exposed to someone sprayed Febreze and other stuff that wasn't supposed to go where on a, we don't put that on couches or anywhere where you're going to have people's heads, but Sharma, peace be upon you.